welcome to Educator Insights, where we discuss teaching the digital age and embracing technology to enhance learning. I'm your host, Olivia Lara Gresti, and today I am thrilled to have a very special guest joining us. Please give a warm welcome to Angelica Spratley, a distinguished senior data science instructor at the Flatiron School. In this episode, we will embark on a thought-provoking journey exploring the captivating realm of technology, education, and diversity, bridging the gap in data science. Angelica's expertise and unique perspective will undoubtedly enlighten us all, as we are sure this discussion will offer some invaluable insights. So with that, I want to extend my gratitude to Angelica for gracing us with her presence today and to our cherished listeners. So Angelica, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
I'm glad to be here with you, Olivia.
Thank you. And so Angelica, Jelly, is it okay if I call you Jelly?
Yeah, definitely call me Jelly.
When I was a teacher, definitely it was Lara Gresti was kind of a mouthful for students. So I turned it into Miss LG. So I love a nickname that carries
Ooh,
through with
Miss
people.
LG. Yeah, I think K through 12 call me by my last name, but my adult learners just call me Jelly.
I love that. It's very, it makes students feel familiar, like they really know you. So that's awesome. Well, I wanted to just kind of, give our listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit. So I was hoping you could provide us to some insights. I know that you're working as a data science instructor now, but I was hoping you could give us some insights into your background and the path that led you to this involvement in data science and in curriculum design.
Yeah, I think I just mentioned that I did K through 12 as well. So after I got my bachelor's degree, I transitioned in becoming an engineering teacher at a high school. So I taught juniors and seniors, computer science, as well as digital electronics. And both of those were advanced placement courses. So we did a lot of video game design, we did Python code, and we even talked about data science a little bit. So that propelled me to actually get a master's in data analytics, where we did pretty much data analytics and data science from A through Z, as well as do a project while I was getting my master's that was very purposeful in predicting substance abuse relapse in patients so that we can intervene and save lives. So that was like my first exposure to a data science model. Loved it so much, went into the consulting field, both for higher education universities as well as pharmaceutical industries, and then said, hey, I'm missing that education. I think as a lot of teachers do, they're like, how can I add education back into my day to day? So decided to actually marry the two, data science as well as education. So now I am making content, making curriculum, and actually helping adult learners transition into the industry to become data scientists, machine learning engineers, or somewhere in the AI space.
That's awesome. And I love that, you have a bit of a windy path. It all kind of comes together beautifully as you say it. But, for a lot of our listeners out there and just people in general, paths don't always have that linear path. And so even for your students, I'm sure it's great for them to see someone who's tried a couple of different, fields, but has found kind of this underlying thread that connects them all. So that's awesome. And, just thinking at that a little bit. And I think that something that's pretty cool for both of us is that we share a background in the field of biology. And so I'm curious if you think that this foundation has influenced your role as a data scientist in any way.
Yeah, so go biology people, biologists. I think while I was getting my undergrad in biology, I didn't equate anything that I was doing as data science, right? It wasn't until I became a data scientist and a consultant or data analyst where I was like, hey, that degree actually prepared me for this role, because I know maybe with you too, Olivia, that you spent some time in labs. We were collecting data, using our great pipettes, putting stuff on agar plates, things of that nature. And we were collecting data and we were doing trials over and over and over again in the lab. And so just the importance of data and how collecting data and analyzing data is very important to data science. I was actually on the trajectory of data science and didn't even know it.
No, that's awesome. And I think that's really great for our students and our teachers to really think about because, if you're teaching whatever class you're teaching, maybe it's math or whatever it is, you're really exposing your students to more than just that one subject. Even, an art teacher that might be working with geometric shapes and whatnot might be getting into proportions, getting into architecture. Every subject is so interdisciplinary in certain ways, and it's great for our educators to hear from you, thinking about your student perspective, that you were learning about, this whole field of data science while you were actually, technically getting a biology degree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like you said, even the arts are so important now, especially with which we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, with just generating art landscapes and using music wavelengths to predict out music and sound so that we can do algorithms to help people that are hearing impaired. There's so many use cases in data science that covers almost every subject. So it's great that you mentioned, especially the arts as well, because arts can also prepare you versus just the hard sciences.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Let's dive into it. So, as a data scientist and as a teacher now, I'm curious about how you're leveraging AI and technology to enhance the learning experience for data science students and how this technology might help you facilitate student engagement and interaction.
Yeah, so I love AI, data science, and how it all comes together. And I know this has been a controversial topic for instructors. Like, do I allow my students to use things like ChatGPT or generative AI in the classroom? And what is the risk associated with that? I will say my use of AI is not representative of the thoughts of Flatiron School as an organization. These are just my thoughts and opinions and what I do in my own personal classroom. So, yes, I'm all about using AI in the classroom. So, a lot of my students, since they are in data science, they are more aware of the pros and cons of AI, which we're going to talk about later. So, they use it in a more responsible fashion. And so, definitely will give pointers there on how your students can use it responsibly. But since they code all day, there's a lot of AI tools out here. So they have Copilot, Paired Programmer. As long as they have that .edu account, they can use it for free. So really, really love the student accounts that we're able to provide students, or that you should be providing students, to let them leverage some of these tools and technologies. And that is just like their coding assistant. It's going to help them troubleshoot their code, especially if they can't get to me quickly, right? So a lot of students, if they're working on an assignment at home or they're in the class and I'm in a breakout room with another student and they really need help troubleshooting, they can just go into this AI assistant and it's going to give them a hint about where they went wrong and explain why that code is wrong. It also allows them to learn multiple languages. So this Copilot can actually translate their code from, let's say, Python into another language such as Java. So if they really want to get more and more technical skills underneath their belt, this is a great AI tool for them. Also, I encourage my students to always do self learning. I know that people probably have heard of Khan Academy, Coursera, things like Data Camp. I'm going to highlight Data Camp, where they have an AI assistant right inside of the e-learning platform. So anytime the students gets an answer wrong, or they need a hint, or they need the entire solution, they can just click on that AI assistant and type what the issue is, and it's going to help them solve that problem. And also, of course, ChatGPT. That's probably the most popular AI tool that educators are familiar with. I do not allow them to regurgitate ChatGPT onto assessments, but I do encourage them when they need to get started to like brainstorm creative solutions to problems, or to summarize a long research paper to enhance learning comprehension or reading comprehension, or to get some quick facts about a package that they want to use in their project. Also, Canva, they have AI to help them generate slide decks, to give them their own template of a slide deck. And they also have AI tools to help generate images, right? And so they can actually enhance their creativity by generating a template that suits their personality, suits the business problem, as well as generating images that also represents them. So these are some of many ways that I leverage that AI in the classroom, Olivia.
Yeah, and Jelly, that you mentioned so many great platforms and models. And I think, especially thinking about the learners that you have, it makes sense, that these tools are out there. They should be practicing with them. And of course, we've all heard of ChatGPT, but thinking about getting into more specifics that, the different models that are best for each industry and kind of allowing students to explore how to leverage these models in different ways is awesome. And I do want to mention, I love that you are calling out some of those free tools for any educators listening out there. Definitely thinking about which tools your students can have access to and kind of leverage that unique role of a student. I know personally, when students find out that they're kind of elite and have that exclusive access, it gets them really excited. So definitely finding, as an educator, I think finding those resources for students is a really important role that you play, because it just, allows them, the internet has a lot out there, right? So being able to point students in the right direction really can help. And as you said, help them really find the tools to enhance their creativity. I love that framing of how you're really encouraging them to use those tools.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Copilot is definitely one that is great for students' accounts that are working in computer science. But there are free tools out here, or at least free trials. Not all the tools that I mentioned are free, but they will give you some exposure that you can try it out as an educator. And if you have to go and get the budget for it or do fundraising for it, just so that you can utilize it in your classroom, I will say that that is a great thing to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you kind of touched on this before, but I'm curious, how do you approach your students' use of AI for assignments? I know you mentioned not for tests, but as data scientists, do you think they have a different perception of AI as compared to students in other fields?
Yeah, I think most definitely. So it's important for me that before I introduce them to AI and all of these tools and technologies that I've mentioned, for them to understand the bias in it, right? AI is not going to always give them the right answer, but if they have the ability to critically think and see right from wrong and not just take AI at face value, do their own investigation, become like their own investigators, they can leverage AI in a more responsible way. So, definitely with my data science students, they really understand that just because it's generating that code doesn't mean that's the correct code for your business problem. So, how can you go through the output line by line to see if that's what the output actually should be? So, they are able to do a lot of QA and QC on generated output, which I always encourage them. I tell them to think of these tools like Wikipedia. I know a lot of teachers, at least when I was going through school, was all like, hey, Wikipedia or Ask Jeeves. I think Ask Jeeves was like a long time ago when we used it, right?
We
Um,
might be dating ourselves by saying, ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. Um, it's fine to start there, but it may not be the sound of truth. So get other resources, cite other sources. And that's the same thing with my students. I don't want them to just cite AI, right? I want them to be able to use it as a starting point, like Wikipedia, and then try to do research on other sources to make sure that is the expected code or the expected facts that they hope to give and to hope to get out of these tools. So yes, they definitely understand the responsible use of AI. But like I said, AI is great. Like some of my students hate reading. It's going to help them paraphrase white papers. Some of my students do not like giving presentations. So AI is going to give them presentation pointers. Some AI tools out here, you can upload a video, Olivia, and it's going to tell you how to enhance that video, right? Some of them get writer's block and they don't even know where to start. So AI is going to help them brainstorm activities as far as logos or slogans that they can use in their business. And yeah, they are very much aware of the inaccuracies of these tools, yet they are still can be considered enhancements to kind of get them at least starting the race, and then they can finish the race themselves.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, just keeping in mind that, students want to think about what's actually best for them. Just because it's there doesn't mean that it should be, what they're taking. And, AI is great, but then if you can't perform the test or do the actual presentation or whatever it is, you might realize, hey, I didn't really learn this. I didn't really check my sources. This isn't actually accurate. So I think this is, in the classroom is the place for that failure for students to try it out, realize that, hey, I got called out. I didn't actually check into their sources doesn't work, but this is the place to learn that. And if they're not being encouraged to try these new platforms, they're not going to learn how to use them responsibly, as you're kind of mentioning. So I definitely think that that's great that you're finding the space for that. And even just, giving the space for that type of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Um, I wanted to, think a little bit of that. We talked about the data bias that you're mentioning, and I'm sure your students as data scientists understand a little bit more about the intricacies there, where all these models of generative AI have been trained on existing data, and that data is not always, I should just say, is biased, right? It's biased already, and so thinking at that, I'm curious your thoughts on why it might be crucial to have data scientists from diverse backgrounds working in the field, particularly considering all of these issues of bias.
Yeah. And just like you mentioned, Olivia, a lot of the data that we have is bias, or the bias exists in the data we don't have, right? So we're trying to apply some of these data science solutions or models to groups that we don't even have the data for, right? So if I'm trying to do a model to predict policing, and this is a very popular algorithm that came out in 2016 called the Compass algorithm, that was unfairly putting African American males behind bars at a higher rate because the algorithm wasn't even trained on African American males to begin with. So it couldn't decipher in an image an African American male from actually the nighttime lighting. So it had something to do with
Mm.
lighting as well. And so these are things that we don't want to fall victim to as data scientists. And so to help with that, maybe having a diverse member on the team that comes from the African American culture that can say, hey, our skin tones don't show up well at night. So if we're going to use these algorithms and police cameras, can we make sure that we have different types of lighting, different types of filters, that we have more data of African American images so that we're not falsely putting people behind bars, right? So that's an example of an algorithm that can really cause a negative societal impact, all because there was bias and there wasn't enough diversity there to recognize the bias. So having diverse teams that can really look at the data, understand what's in the data, what's not in the data, because sometimes what we don't capture is just as important as what we do, and really go through actually labeling the data as well. And this is coming from people, not just from diverse race, ethnicity, gender, or sex, but also with age, right? I know that a lot of now analysis that we do with social media, we're trying to do sentiment analysis. How do people feel about the new iPhone that's coming out? Do they feel good? Do they feel bad? And I don't know about you, Olivia. I don't understand a lot of the acronyms in some of the younger generations. I don't understand those emojis, right? So I may mislabel a sentiment as bad when it was actually good, right? So even that type of diversity from all age groups is very important, right? So we want to make sure that we are examining the data sets, that we have this diverse team that's able to look at bias coming in as well as bias coming out, so that we don't make wrong business decisions, or worse, negatively impact the society where we harm somebody's health or we take somebody's life away from them early just because an algorithm told us to do it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your emphasis on it's the data that we might not have, right? If it's just, lacking, because I think that when people think, well, we've done this study, we've done a lot of, we pulled all this data, maybe the numbers, right? We have thousands of data sets, whatever, samples, whatever it is. But when the team is not thinking about the diversity of the samples and making sure that it's ranging and getting data from different types of people or wherever it is, you're right that data is not accurate. The quantity doesn't matter when the quality is not quite there. And I really love your bringing up the sentiment analysis of the age, because you're right. I mean, emotions are notoriously difficult, right? We're all working on understanding our own emotions. And then when you get into this sentiment analysis here, I mean, sarcasm is notoriously also difficult to understand. And so when emojis are the thing that changes the entire message, well, we need to make sure we have people on data teams who understand that and can kind of tag things correctly so that we do get an accurate understanding. Because as we know, so much is happening on the internet right now, politically, and just kind of understanding the state of American affairs. And I think it's important that we have a grasp on that for, to make sure that we have a society that we want to live in. So I definitely appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as educators as well, if you gave your students end of semester surveys and only the top students who got A's in your class responded to the survey, are you really capturing the complete picture of areas of improvement? No, because the other students who may have gotten a C, a D, or an F didn't even respond, right? So there's no response bias as well as response bias. And how do we actually build relationships so that we can get more responses? Because data can help us solve so many issues out here. We just need to have the data in the first place. And having diverse teams to kind of gather that data is very important.
Right. And I won't pick your brain too much on this, but I even think about, I like, with a restaurant review, right? Like, is it all just 5 stars and 1 star? Because people who are choosing to fill out surveys are either really happy or really upset. We want to make sure that we're getting data samples that are actually representative of the average experience of whoever is being interviewed.
Olivia, you actually use like my first example that I always tell my students when I'm talking about bias. I ask them,
Really?
raise your hand. How many of you have filled out a restaurant survey or a fast food receipt survey in the last 3 months? And literally no student raises their hand, right? Because most of
Hmm.
the time, the people who fill out the surveys are either really, really mad or they're really, really happy. There is no in
Exactly.
between, right? So, Olivia, you're already thinking like a data scientist. I need to have you on my team.
Well, thank you. Maybe that's going to be my next pivot there. I'll follow you in the pursuit of biology into data science.
Awesome.
Well, I definitely, thinking about all of this, and I guess my next question would just be thinking about, you have these students who are working in the data science field and they're actually looking at data and they're also using AI. And how do you then assess and evaluate the learning outcomes of those students? And how do you think about, how they're going to be prepared for this world where AI and data, or I should say, the data that they're producing is going to be used to train more AI, generative AI models? How do you actually assess and evaluate the learning outcomes of your students?
Yeah, and I think especially recently, I would say at least over the past 5 years if not decade, with the controversy around standardized testing and assessments, right? Do tests and do standardized testing really show a student's knowledge of a subject, right? And it's very controversial. Some people may say yes, some people may say no. But we all can agree that assessments aren't the only way that we can assess our students, right? So even though I don't allow them to use AI generated content on their graded assessments, I'm still able to assess certain soft skills, for instance. So if they do cite the source in their projects and cite other sources, I can get a feel for their integrity, right? Which is really great when you want to go into the work field. How much integrity does a candidate have? I also can assess their critical thinking. So, are they actually just on projects regurgitating a code and the code was wrong? Or do they have the critical thinking ability to really fact check it and understand that, hey, this was really a biased result or an inaccurate result and challenge it, right? Outside of that, I can assess their creativity. So, are they using these tools to enhance their creativity? Do I see slide decks that have bells and whistles in it? Do I see where they have generated image through text that's showing that fits the business problem? Are they kind of thinking outside the box, as well as peer feedback? So, my students do group projects as well as solo projects, so us having their peers give them feedback about how great of a team player they are, how much they came on time to meetings, how approachable they were, if they were able to explain technical things to a non-technical audience, all of those are great soft skills and assessments that's going to benefit them when they go out into the workplace or even college or even their next journey in life. So I don't just rely on graded assessments, I rely on them as a person and as a student, right? Do they have that integrity? Do they have that creativity? Do they have that critical thinking? Do people want to work with them? And then that's how I go about assessing them overall as a student.
Yeah, well, I got to say, I hope some educators are listening because I think this is exactly where, we're I think this is one of the big conversations happening is how do we actually assess students and, however people feel about actual tests themselves, it's really what are we actually assessing students for? And as you mentioned, creativity is huge, but then also how well do you work with others? And I think, are you actually kind of having that ethical mindset and being able to kind of be credible there? And I think that just given, ethical and being an ethical person is a benefit in any job, in any role. And I think thinking about even those interview questions that your students are going to end up facing, they need to be prepared. And so what better way, there's nothing worse than a classroom where students learn all these things and they're like, wait a second, I'm not ready for the world. I'm not, this isn't, my skills are half baked and I need to kind of get that next level up so that I can actually get a job. And so it's great that your learning outcomes are really kind of skills that employers out there are looking for.
Yeah, most definitely. And having that one-on-one feedback sessions with students that I do at least every 3 weeks to kind of say, this is your progress, but this is also your peer feedback and how you can react to that feedback and use it to be better in the next upcoming 3 weeks is very beneficial because at the end of the day, AI is going to be an assistive technology in a lot of these industries, at least for data science roles, right? So I can teach you the technical, but I can't teach you how to be a great person, right? You have to really embody, I want to be a great person. I want to have integrity. I want to enhance these soft skills that's going to put me in a great position when I go into the workplace.
Yeah. Well, you are someone who's in the workplace. And so I'm curious how you've been staying updated with all the latest advancements in technology and AI and thinking about, as you mentioned, how to assess your students. How do you actually continually enhance your teaching methods?
I'm not going to lie to you, Olivia. It seems like every day there's like 15 new AI tools coming out. Like you can
Yes.
think of this as back as the space race when we teach students like the space race. If the United States can get to the moon quicker than any other country, right? And so this is what's going on in AI right now. I will say over the last month, we've probably had 100 new AI tools just come on the scene. So it's no
Mhm.
possible way that you will have time to go through each tool. However, I do love these virtual conferences now. I know COVID was a detriment, but one of the benefits that it had to the workplace as far as professional development is concerned, that a lot more industry leaders are hosting virtual conferences. So
Mhm.
I just attended an open data science conference that also had an on-site location in New York. Snorkel AI just had a conference this month. Data Camp just had an AI conference. Microsoft just had a VS Code Day, as well as Cascade and Databricks. And this is all within 2 months that I've attended all these conferences. And these
Wow.
conferences, learning from panels that have been using AI in the workforce, how to create business strategies, how to help my students with project management, all of those have been free and very beneficial conferences that you can just look up right on LinkedIn. I want to find a conference about X, Y, and Z, and they're going to pull up, right? As
Yeah,
well
that's
as
great.
yeah, it's awesome. Online educational platforms, like I said, I've always kept up to date with the new Google Analytics certification that just got launched a couple of months ago, which I had a hand in creating. So, really shout out to the Google Analytics certifications on that, as well as Data Camp, Khan Academy, Coursera. All of these online educational platforms are putting out courses for prompt engineering, generative AI 101, to really give exposure to people that may not even have a tech role, but they have a non-tech role because we want them to become data literate at least, and then eventually AI fluent. Because that is just where the industry is going to go, no matter what role that you're in. So, those educational platforms are always great. And of course, following industry leaders on social media platforms, right? Use it for the benefit. I'm definitely a LinkedIn person times 10. So making sure that as soon as somebody posts a nice little gem, I put that little gem in my pocket and make sure I share it with others as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, for some educators out there, LinkedIn is not always the most, there aren't as many educators active on there. I don't want to say a blanket statement that none are, but I think that there are, as, people in the industry who are on LinkedIn a bit more, there are just, you find out about great events in that way. And I'm sure some of those conferences were posted about there, and just finding, I think, the right voices that are kind of aligned. There's a million people out there, and there's a lot of people with great content, but finding just one or two that are kind of posting content and tapped into the networks and conferences and things that you want to attend is a great way to kind of stay abreast there as well. So I think that that's great to push for that. And definitely these virtual conferences. I mean, even I just attended the ISTE conference in Philadelphia and got to see just so much new educational technology. And so, even being there in person, I couldn't see all of it. And so I think just attending them as often as one can, and especially the sessions with industry leaders, can be super, super helpful. So it's great to hear that. And I would just love to think a little bit, clearly you are supporting in your own classroom students exploring AI and all of the applications of it that are out there. And in your opinion, what measures can schools and educational institutions take to guarantee this fair availability of AI and digital learning resources to all their students?
Yeah, I love this question because accessibility is very important. And the reality is that not everyone has access to be able to use these tools and technology, right? So it starts with us empowering our teachers. So, just as I've mentioned, yes, there are free resources out here as far as when you go online and you're looking for AI tools. But then if you don't have the computers in your classroom, it's not going to be a benefit, right? So, really empowering teachers through our state budgets, right? And making sure that we have what we need in the classroom to really make sure that students are not falling behind on this technology innovative demand that's coming out. Like digital transformation and digital technologies are going to be used a lot more in college as well as in the workplace. So really, really preparing the teachers, even through conferences, as we just mentioned, right? If the conference calls, how are you allowing your teachers to take their professional development days or their teacher work days and actually learn some of the generative AI technologies that are out here that they can incorporate in their classroom? So I think it starts all with preparing the teachers and then providing access. Yes, if there is not a way where you can actually bring computers into the class, then showing a presentation about generative AI, a video there, coding with paper, going on a low cost field trip to one of the tech industries out here that it would be great to have you to teach students about AI. All of these are good things that we can utilize. And then if we do have those tools in the classroom, now how can we innovate the curriculum, right? How can we add this AI knowledge? And I will just give a shout out real quickly to Upshots. Upshots is an online platform for gamification. So it helps students learn any content by giving them badges and leaderboards and things of that. There's also lessonplans.ai as well as educationcopilot.com and Auto Classmate. And all of those help teachers develop AI generated lesson plans that can increase engagement across any subject that you're teaching. And they are honestly great AI tools that the teachers can use, even if the students can't use AI quite yet.
Yeah, and I love that you're pushing for that teacher education and access as well, because I think just speaking to you, you are staying up to date with all of these tools. And I think that, there's no one that their students are going to trust more than their own teacher. And so when they are not sure, as we said, the internet can be an overwhelming place. There's so many tools out there, but having a teacher that encourages them to just try one or two and can say, I've done this, I can tell you how this one works, just allowing students to have a little bit of guidance with at least the first couple of tools that they try, I think can really help students then take that leap and the next step and actually try the tools out on their own. But I do think you're right. It starts with the teachers.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah, well, I think, Angelica, it's been so lovely talking to you. And it's going to bring us to the end of today's episode. I do really want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our incredible guest, Angelica, for joining us and sharing her invaluable insights on our podcast today. Our expertise and passion have really enriched our discussion. And I really hope you, our listeners, have gained as much knowledge and inspiration as we have here. We encourage you to express your thoughts and share your experiences about today's topic on social media using the hashtag MagicEducatorInsights. Thanks for joining us. Remember to tune in next time for more engaging conversations on educator insights. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring. Bye.
Bye.